What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. I'm Bradford Irons. Today I'm going to walk you through a few considerations when figuring out whether or not you should buy a house in 2023 and what you can do to prepare for when the time is right. Let's get into it. The pandemic, the shutdown of the economy, and the subsequent government overspending has drastically impacted the housing market. In the last 3.5 years since the pandemic started, housing supply dropped almost 22%. And in that same period, housing prices went up almost 30%. That's an average increase of over $30,000 a year, which is a lot of people's total annual salary. Now, to combat this and other drivers of inflation, the Fed stepped in and started increasing interest rates back in March of 2022. Right now, the federal funds rate is between 5.25% and 5.5%. And the average mortgage APR is between 6 and 8%. Rising prices and interest rates has made it very hard for the average American to afford a home. And according to Fannie Mae's Home Purchase Sentiment Index, 82% of Americans feel right now is a bad time to buy a house. But on the other hand, many renters who are on the verge of not being able to afford a decent home are in the mindset that housing prices and interest rates are going to continue to rise, so they better buy a house now before they're priced out of the market. And this very well may be true because although the Fed did announce a pause to rate hikes, all the Fed Chair Committee members believe that more rate hikes this year will be needed to combat inflation. Now, if you haven't seen this chart before, this is the dot plot showing where each committee member believes the rate should be by the end of each year. And you can see that the vast majority of committee members believes the rate should be between 5.5% and 5.75% by the end of 2023. This would mean another 0.5% of rate hikes this year. Many people want to buy before this happens, especially renters who feel they're just throwing away money on rent. But it's very important that you take a step back, analyze all your options, and don't make a decision out of fear because there are many reasons that buying a house in 2023 might not be a good idea. The first one is high mortgage interest rates. Although the Feds will most likely increase interest rates more this year, the rates are already really high. The same Fed dot plot showing interest rates going up this year also shows the rate decreasing almost 0.5 percentage point by the end of 2024 and decreasing over 1% by 2025. Now, that might not sound like a lot, but it is. As an example, the payment on a $400,000 house with a 30-year fixed rate mortgage at 6.5% has a monthly mortgage payment of $23.51. Now, the payment on that same mortgage but with a 5.5% interest rate is $21.45 a month. That's a difference of over $200 a month and $74,000 over the course of the mortgage. That's nothing to laugh at. That same $200 could be invested and could grow to almost $500,000 in 30 years. So the total cost of that 1% is actually quite substantial. And sure, you could always buy a house now, and if interest rates do drop, you can always just refinance. But this will come at a cost of between 2 and 5% of the principal amount in closing costs. The second reason is the low supply of homes. You may not want to buy a home in the remainder of this year simply because the supply of houses is really low. Most people that already have a home have an interest rate below 3%, and no one wants to give up that rate just to go buy another home with the same monthly payment but with 40% less house. So people are waiting to sell, not putting their homes on the market, which further reduces the inventory of homes and gives you just less options to choose from. If you look at the housing trends over the last 25 years, we are still at historically lows. And the supply of homes has still been low over the last year, and it can take a while for housing inventory to recover and for housing prices to fall if they do at all. After all, Zillow does predict that housing prices will increase 5% in 2023. So instead of looking at the macro trends for the entire United States, look at the trends in the market in your specific area because housing prices and housing trends are highly localized. And even more important than your local housing trends is your specific situation because even local housing trends can be hard to predict. So instead of giving you all this market data, let me give you 4 things to consider in your individual situation to know whether or not right now is the right time to buy a house. But before I do, I just want to ask you to subscribe, hit the like button, and share this video with anyone you know who might be considering buying a house. It not only can help them, but it can also help us grow this channel as well, so we'd really appreciate it. Credit score. One of the biggest things to look at when figuring out how much house you can afford is your mortgage interest rate. And this is highly impacted by your credit score. According to FICO, the average interest rate for someone with a 620 credit score is 8.34%, as compared to 6.751% for someone with a 760 score. That's a big difference. On the same $300,000 house, the person with the lower credit score will pay $328 more every month because of their bad credit. That equates to $118,000 $100,000 more over the course of a 30-year mortgage. So it's a good idea to take a step back and focus on improving your credit score before you buy a house. Make sure you check your credit report and fix any delinquencies that you have on there, as well as negotiate and pay back any debts that you have that may have been sent to collections. Make sure you start paying your bills on time by setting reminders for when bills are due and enrolling in automatic bill pay. And of course, pay off all your credit card debt. Save a nice down payment. Do you have a nice down payment saved to buy a house? You don't want to buy a house with no money down. Ideally, you'd like to have 20% saved, but if you're a first-time home buyer, 5 to 10% is just fine. But just remember, there are downsides to having a lower payment. Lower down payment means higher risk to the lender because you have less stake in the house, which means they typically give you a slightly higher interest rate. Lower than 20% down typically also means that you're gonna have to pay private mortgage insurance to protect the lender just in case you don't pay your bills. PMI is typically 1 to 2% of the loan amount each year. Lower down payment also means you'll have a higher mortgage. So not only are you paying a higher interest rate, but you're also paying that higher interest rate on a larger mortgage. This means even more interest that you pay over the life of the loan. And putting no money down can be especially risky. There's all sorts of predictions out there, like another 2008 style housing crash. Now, I personally don't believe this, especially after looking at the data, but you just have to know that if you put little or no money down and the housing market takes a turn for the worse, you might end up owing more on the house than it's worth. This will make it harder for you to refinance and sell your house. And statistically, it also puts you at higher risk for foreclosure because of not being able to afford the higher monthly payment. Third, can you afford the monthly payment? It's very important that you don't buy too much house and end up being house poor. After all, it's just a house and there's plenty of other things in life that you probably want to spend your money on. Whether it's going on trips and vacations, enjoying nights out with your spouse and family and friends, or saving and investing for the future. Having too high a mortgage payment also means you have less money for other expenses like groceries, utilities, and medical bills. It also means you have less money to give to many causes that are important to you. So I'm a big fan of having monthly payments that you can easily pay, and that's if you have a payment at all. It really frees up your income to enjoy life and build wealth. And with interest rates so high, cash deals are actually looking very good if you can swing it. But I know most people aren't able to do this, especially with the crazy high prices that we have right now. Keeping your overall housing expenses to less than 25% of your net income or your take-home pay is a great goal to aim for. But even this is hard these days. The median household income in the United States is a little over $80,000. If you assume a 15% total effective tax rate and no other investments or healthcare expenses coming out of your check, the total take-home pay is around $5,600 a month. According to the Ramsey Home Affordability Calculator, with 20% down, the max home you could afford is $185,000. When I look at the Charlotte area, for example, there's a total of 3 homes in this area under that price point. Even when I expand the surrounding communities, you can see that there's very little, if anything, out there. So I understand when people flex that 25% rule, but you still want to make sure that you leave enough room in your budget for other things. Is it cheaper to buy than rent in your area? Many people for years would say it's a waste of money to rent because you're not building equity in your home. However, rent being a waste of money is not always the case, especially in this housing market. According to Realtor.com, rents actually started to decrease in May and June. And according to a Redfin study of the 50 most populous metro areas in the United States, it is actually cheaper to rent in 46 of those markets. Big difference from a few years ago. So renting can actually be a great option for many people right now, especially if you're someone who doesn't want to bother with maintenance and repairs on your home. But remember that rents typically go up every year. Now, if you want to know if it's better to rent or buy in your specific situation, there are many different rent versus buy calculators out there, like the one on Realtor.com. Just make sure you do your research and put accurate data in, because garbage in means garbage out. But whatever you decide to do, whether rent versus buy, make sure you leave room in your budget for other things like paying off debt, investing, and having fun. You don't want to be broke because of your home. If you want to understand how people end up house poor or other ways people end up broke, even when they're making 6 figures, then continue to this video right here. If you need one-on-one help in your specific situation, please click the link in the description and I'll be glad to help. Thank you.